where you see the plants, mine are 5-gallon buckets. Each one has a half-inch pipe coming out and returns everything back to the reservoir. The pump, when I first started, I ran the pump 4 times a day for about an hour. This last year I thought, well, wonder what happens if I just leave it run all the time. Didn't see any difference. I ran it 24 hours a day, didn't bother with the timer, and the plants did just as good as if I had it on the timer. In fact, I think in a lot of ways it's better. And just as a side note, I don't know if you know, when you get a tomato plant and it's 90 degrees, those leaves start curling back and they stop producing, the blooms will drop off of it. You go hydroponics and you're giving it water throughout that whole period, the leaves never curl up and they continue to produce. Because on the bottom side of the leaf, it actually sweats. And that sweating with the air blowing across it cools that plant down. That's how the plant, it's like we do, we sweat, the plant sweats. This is the system that I built 2015, I think, or 14. And I've changed the reservoir at the bottom, but basically it's sitting approximately 2 foot off the ground. Just 19 to 20 inches is where I'm at. Just big enough that I can get a large 18-gallon, 28-gallon reservoir underneath it. So I can have gravity return of the solution. So everything pumps up on the black line. And this is a half-inch line. These are 1/4-inch feet and tubes. And it comes back on a half-inch line, it comes back, and I let it free fall into the water. And that aerates the plants. And I've got an extension cord to cable, that's it. Mix the chemicals every 2 to 3 weeks, put new chemicals in, and you're done. That's just what I've already told you. So most people do not start their plants like I do. So you go to the nursery, you buy a plant. First thing you do in hydroponics is you put them under running water, take all the soil off, because you don't want that to get caught up in your plant medium and clog up your drains. And then from that moment on, that plant is bare root and it stays bare root for its entire life. I guess I didn't tell you what medium I used. For the first 5 years, I used perlite, and then this year I changed over and this is clay balls. This is the perlite. I've got more perlite, but I just thought I'd try the clay balls for a couple of years and see how that works. Perlite is okay, except when you go 5 or 6 years and all that organic material that you didn't get out, the little micro roots that went everywhere, it just gets so solid water doesn't run through it like it should. The water should run right through like you're going through gravel. That's the whole point of putting water and letting it run so that it gets oxygen, it gets water, and everybody's happy. So basically, I told you, it pumps up through the half-inch, goes to a 1/4 inch, returns back down. This whole system that I've got at Sally's, 16 square feet, grows 8 mature plants. Like I said, I used to run a timer. I may go back to it, but this year we had a few hot days and I had the timer set to run continuous, and I thought, well, let's see what's going to happen. And everything ran fine. Now I do shut the timers off for about an hour at night. What I have at Sally's house is I have 4 28-gallon totes that's plugged together, and there's a pump in there, and it pumps up for that 1 hour and refills the tank that's underneath there, so that when you're using a lot of water, you need to find a way to replace it. And I'm a lazy guy, so as if I can find any way of having some timer or machine or pump to refill it, that's what I do. Thank you. In my house, I've got an IBC container. I don't know if you're familiar with IBC containers. They come in a cage. They're all white plastic, 265 gallons. And I've got one of those by my garden. I fill it to the top. I put a little pump in it that pumps 6 gallons an hour and hook it up to a float on the side of the reservoir. And it just, when it turns on, it fills up till the float's satisfied. And it shuts itself off and does it once a day. And under extreme weather, I've explained, but at 90 degrees or more, plants suffer a lot. The ground dries up. They're trying to spread more roots out. As they spread more roots out to get that water, they stop producing. And then when they get satisfied, they start producing, and then they go back through the cycle again. Build more roots, put on more fruit. In hydroponics, they never have to build more roots. They're getting everything they need. So all they do is produce fruit. Well, you don't need to care about it. This is that same garden in about August.
What kind of tomatoes are those? What kind of tomatoes did you plant?
I use big beef. I use mortgage lifter. Sally likes this thing called steak sandwiches or something. And so those are basic ones. I really like mortgage lifter and big beef more than anything. Mortgage lifter is nice because it's an heirloom. I saved the seed in 2008, and I've been taking plants and making them off those seeds since.
Wow.
It's kind of a distinct tomato. It has 6 sides to it. I mean, not like a big, but you'll notice when you pick it up, you can feel those 6 sides. And all you do is slice apart, give it a squeeze, and you'll get about 400 seeds. Dry them out, and you'll have seeds for several years. And then there's pepper. The end ones are pepper plants. They're kind of hard to see. This is a pepper plant. So these are the reservoir I've got to pick up extra water and refill the holding tank that holds the chemicals. This is on the other side of the fence, by her driveway, that's coming over this direction. So the plant's grown both backwards and over the fence and continues to grow. Now, when I first started, I just went to Amazon and found some hydroponic chemicals and made a lot of mistakes. Bought a lot of crap that just does not work. And then I started watching stuff on YouTube, and there's a guy that recommended Master Blend with calcium nitrate, and so I switched to that about 4 years ago. And that's very simple. It's just a powder. It takes about an ounce, well, let's say 60 grams of Master Blend, 60 grams of calcium nitrate, 30 grams of just Epsom salts. That gives the magnesium. And you mix it up separately, then put it in your container, and then it does good for 2 or 3 weeks, and then you start over again. So I think someplace in here I've got a calculation. It costs about $20 for an entire year for chemicals. It's not expensive. It's probably the same thing you would pay if you went and got 2 bags of 10-10-10 at Walmart or someplace. Okay, the Master Blend is 4 of nitrogen, and then the rest is your bottom chemicals. And then the calcium nitrate is basically all nitrogen. Why that's important, I'll show you in a minute. So you mix it up, 2 parts, keep them separate and then give about 5 minutes between each one when you dump it into your holding tank. If you don't, they coagulate, and what you get is rocks. I had my first attempt at growing. I bought a box of stuff that was pre-mixed, and every 2 weeks when I cleaned it out, half the chemicals were coating all the way around the inside of the tank. When I changed to this system, I never had anything plating out. everything stayed in solution and stayed available to the plant. So there's the blend, about 2 ounces on each one. So what I discovered about my 3rd year was, I was reading and I found only one gentleman that told me, if you reduce the nitrogen after you start seeing blooms, the plant will double or triple the number of blooms on it. And it's a little phenomenon plants do. If you stress a plant, the first thing it wants to do is put on more blooms to replace itself before it dies. I was out at Apple Acres, and he was showing me he had problems with a couple fruit trees, and he put bands on the bottom and hit it with a baseball bat for a while and shut the water off. And he said, I cut those off, started blooming like crazy. Because if the plant thinks it's going to die, I mean, we don't think of plants as having a brain, but plants have survival instincts. If it's going to die, it's going to try to put out the fruit to replace itself before it does. And that's basically what you're doing. You're telling it, the nitrogen low, you may not make it, you better start reproducing quickly. So, I didn't bring all my stuff, but this is the pH meter, and the TDS looks just like it, only it's got an extra button, and what it does is it reads the concentration of the salts in solution. It's basically measures electricity. Most salts conduct electricity. And I know you were used to things like, when I say salt, you're thinking table salt. In chemistry, salts are compounds that have a positive ion component and negative ion component, and together they're neutral, and they're called salts. When I worked at Crane, I worked in batteries, we used hydrogen peroxide, and those solutions, and you don't realize it, but there's a positive and negative to all these things, and that's, if it conducts electricity, that tells you the strength of the solution. So when you first mix it up, you get about 900. If you follow the mixture of 60 grams on each one, you'll get about 900 total. And that's usually how I start my year off. But I've gone as high as 3,500. And the plants, as you can see, really produce at that level. And they put out a lot of fruit. So there's my estimate about what it costs if you bought 1 pound of Master Blend, 1 pound of calcium nitrate, and 1 pound of Epsom salts from Amazon. Epsom salts you can buy at Walmart, and it's cheap, probably have some sitting around anyway. The Master Blend, I found it at Amazon, and I found it at a place called Morgan County Seed. It's the only place on the east of Mississippi I know that sells it. That's what the meters look like. That's total salts in solution, and then the pH meter I just passed around. I try to test pH about once a week, sometimes more sooner than that, depends on how it's looking. If I think there's anything wrong with the plant, or they're starting to look a little strange, first thing I want to do is find out where's the pH and how's the chemicals. If the chemicals low, I just drain the whole thing out and start over. And you can do that. That's to me, one of the other great advantages from soil is if you want to change the whole atmosphere of it, you can do it just by draining the tank and start over. Oh, any questions on the drip system? There's other names for it, yes.
What about flavor? How is there flavor different? I mean, I know you're doing this outside, yeah, but.
Everybody I talk to that tries it says the flavor's fantastic.
Okay.
One of the great flavor components is actually the Epsom salts. Epsom salts builds better flavor in your peppers and your tomatoes. So, I can't taste anything, so, before the COVID, in January, before they announced they had COVID, Sally and I were sick, and I've never been able to taste anything since.
Oh, no.
And so I can't smell anything, I can't taste anything, and so I have to depend on Sally to tell me, hey, you think this stuff is killing you? I don't know. Give me your opinion of what you think of it.
No, it tastes fine, have some more.
So, what do you do to adjust the pH of the seed?
There's an acid that's buffered, what I say, if you just put acid in, any acid, some people have told me, well, I just go down and get a little battery acid over at Lowe's and put a couple drops in, and believe me, it doesn't take more than about 4 or 5 drops in 25 gallons and you change the pH. But they actually sell a stabilized buffer that's food grade. Yeah, trying to remember where I bought that. I buy so much of this crap. I think I actually got that from Amazon. You can get,
What kind is it? I mean, is it like phosphoric or what?
you know, I never read the label. I don't know what acid. I'm sure it's an acid because you can buy both of them in 5-gallon and 1-gallon jugs. And 4 years ago, I bought a gallon jug. I haven't probably used that much yet. You don't just pour it, you take an eyedropper.
Yeah.
And then you wait 5 minutes for the circulation to get done, and then you check it. It doesn't take much to change the pH. I've seen some people on YouTube, that they're cutting up lemons and dumping the lemons in their water to change the pH. Maybe it works, I don't know. So this is the craft key method. And the whole thing is you start your small plant, you have this volume of water. As the plant uses it up, it keeps getting lower and lower and lower. And when the plant matures, you're out of water. In the meantime, roots in the water are taking the nutrients, roots above the water are taking in oxygen. They transform themselves from a solution absorbing root to an oxygen absorbing root. A lot of people like to do this with lettuce. I saw a University of Florida system, and they put, I think it's 2x8s up, put plastic in, filled the whole thing up, put foam trays in, must have had about that much water, had, I don't know, 80 plants, punched down through foam, they floated around, the water got used up, the foam went down, when they got to the bottom, the lettuce was ready. So you don't need pumps, you can put it outdoors, you don't need electricity run to it. Kratky himself shows where he takes these 55-gallon trash containers, and then he fills up different solutions, and he runs it over and just has a little float. So the water has to get down a certain level and fills back up again. And it does it all with gravity. Because in places like Hawaii, electricity in open fields, there's just no way to get electricity in some of these places. And so he came up with this method of growing things without electricity. And that's the biggest claim to fame. And it didn't require any aeration. You can use concrete tubs. I don't know, are anybody familiar with concrete tubs? They're about 3 foot long, 20 inches wide, I don't know, I think 9 inches deep. I buy mine over at Tractor Supply. They're sold so you can mix concrete. Lowe's has them too, but they don't have as good a quality as Tractor Supply does. And they make great planters for gardens like this. So as the water starts going down over time, the plant's still getting all the nutrients it needs, and then it matures and it's done. This is a cucumber plant. I put a 28-gallon container down and just had a lid with one little hole, and in that hole was my cucumber plant. And it started from seed. I just had got enough roots to touch the liquid, and it grew, I think, 3 months and then died because it ran out of solution. but it produced about 15 or 20 cucumbers. I just had it in a south-facing window. So that's the only it's the only one I used was growing cucumbers, but it was pretty effective. There's a lot of good information on the internet about cracky. They say, you know, using old mason jars, people are growing all kinds of stuff in their windows. I usually just grow it outdoors, and when winter comes, it's my day to rest. I don't want to garden anymore all winter. This is the flood and drain system. It's extremely simple, as I said. You have a large container underneath, you have a tray at the top. The pump pumps up, you got a line going up, disperses the water, and when it's done, the water comes back down that same line through the pump into the holding tank. And there's basically what the things look like. So it's a very simple system. The only concern you have to have is you have to have your holding tank much larger than your plant tank, simply because you can only put down so low in your holding tank. You'll get probably you'll leave 20% of the water, and you don't want to run out of water with that pump. So it's just a really nice system to get started. Simple, easy to use. Most people put it on a 4-foot table. So when they're out when they're in their basement picking their fruit, the lights are going on. It's real simple. You never have to bend over. It'd be great for things like strawberries, or beans. You never have to bend over pick them. You just pick them right off the vine at arm's level. So I put mine in a 1 gallon pot. Then I put stones or perlite or something else around it. Cocoa core, I don't know if you're familiar with cocoa cores. That's a really great medium to have. I bought some of that at Walmart, dirt cheap. Comes in a block of, I think a 5-pounder is probably about 1 foot long by almost 1 foot wide, maybe 9 inches tall. And you take it in your wheelbarrow and you throw it in and fill the wheelbarrow full of water, and things just mushrooms out. And what it is it's as they peel off the whole of the coconut, they grind that up. You can get it coarse or fine, and it takes about 20 years for it to break down. And so it leaves little micro spaces through it, so there's always room the oxygen can go through, and the moisture can go through, but they don't absorb the chemicals, they just hold it. And the world is full of core. I think down in South Africa, they have that stuff everywhere because they coconuts, palm oil, everything uses has cocoa core that they can grind up and use. And otherwise they burn it, and that's worse for the environment. That's basically what a mixing tub looks like. So the important thing is you want to fill it up and then put something around it so when your solution is flowing up in that tray, sunlight does not get to it. If it does, you'll start growing algae. Then you'll have all kinds of crud coming back to your tank, coming through your plumbing, coming to the holding tank. Then you got to go clean it all back out. If the sunlight doesn't get to it, you don't grow anything bad. These are the flood and drains. The one on the left is the overflow. That's to always make sure you don't overflow your tank and run the solution out on the ground. It'll return back to the tank with that. The short one is where the water comes up and also where the water returns. My timers, I was setting about 15 minutes every hour and a half. And It just depends on what your medium is and how much breeze you have blowing, what kind of things are going on, how quickly you're evaporating water. You want to adjust your timing so that you're not evaporating too much water, but the plant's not suffering because of a lack of water. There's all kinds of calculations about what your tray is, how many plants you got, how much medium you're putting in, calculates out how many gallons you have to have in your holding tank. Any questions on that one? Yes, sir.
When you said you started keeping your pump on 24/7,
Yes.
did you turn the water flow down or just?
No, just let it run. The plant's gonna take, it's not as though you're flooding it, because it's just running over the roots. And, you know, you got a 1/4-inch line coming in, and you got a 1/2-inch line going out. And you've got a 5-gallon bucket, and you got a root ball about this big around. So, all you're doing is adding nutrients, and the plant, if it needs it, will take it up. If it doesn't need it, it won't take it up. And so it just flows back over, and that's basically how it works. So, I got most of my information when I first started by going to YouTube and watching a guy in Alabama. And he's the one that showed me how to put the buckets together. You know, you take your 5-gallon bucket, go up 2 inches, drill a hole, put a 1/2-inch line down, and what that does is it allows inch to inch and a half of water standing in that thing always. If your pump fails, well, believe me, you'll have a time where if you didn't tie down your 1/4-inch line, if it falls out and starts running on the ground, it doesn't take very long to dump 25 gallons of solution right out. I mean, that pump will pump that pretty quickly. So by having that inch or two of water at the bottom, your plant will at least have some reservoir to go to survive till you catch the problem you did. When I first started, I mean, I had all kinds. Animals were trying to climb up and grab hold of the black water line. When he did, he pulled all the stuff down. And, I learned quickly, you strap everything down. Don't let anything lay loose and assume it'll be okay. So one of the great advantages, of course, is it's just like us humans. If we have all the nutrition we want, all the water we need, we're going to grow big and strong. If we don't, we're not going to grow big and strong. And plants are no different than we are. So if you to get optimum plant, get it off the ground so you don't have to weed it, so you don't have to worry about bugs, and you don't have to water. It'll self-water as long as you keep that tank pretty well filled up. So you don't have to use herbicides, pesticides. You don't have to worry about what's in your soil, what your neighbor's spraying on his yard that's washing into your yard, into your soil. Most chemicals, if you read the literature, says the government doesn't approve chemicals unless they can break down the soil within 8 to 10 days, I think they said. But I had a problem with yellow wood sorrel. It's a really tight, strong plant that grows up. Looks really good when you first get it. Man, if my whole yard was that thick, that would be great. Well, the problem, it takes over everything else. The chemical you use to kill it, one of the things it says on there is do not put it close to the garden. It could take 3 years to break down. So, one, you could put it in your garden, or put it in your yard if it washes in your garden, but your neighbor could be doing the same thing. You have no idea what's in your soil. At least with hydroponics, you have complete control of any contamination that can get in your system. To me, the best thing is it sits up and I don't have to bend over, and it doesn't take any space up. Perlite is something I really enjoy using. It's just that I had so much trouble this year, I decided to go to the clay pellets. I still got 4 cubic foot bags of it in the basement. And it's not very expensive. I think I paid $15 for it, for each bag, and they'll fill 4 or 5 gallon buckets. So on a 6 gallon system, you're using a bag and a half every 5 or 6 years. Sure. To keep everything in the bucket and not go down through the drain, I buy these. They're about $1 a piece. They'll last 2 or 3 years. Those are 5 gallon paint strains. And so you put that in your bucket, then put your stuff inside of it, and it contains everything so that trash won't go back into your system and clog up the pump. I always try to use black tubing as much as I can because that minimizes the sunlight getting through to it. You can watch your roots. If you have to, plant looks bad, put your hand down under the stones and just lift it up and take a look at the root. If it's brown, one of the things you can do is fill it full of water and then put a pint of hydrogen peroxide in it. Hydrogen peroxide will kill whatever's bothering it. And in the process, it goes from H2O2 to H2O, water. It's a really great cleanser. Now, when I buy the buckets, I buy the buckets at either Lowe's or Menards. The first time I just painted them white and didn't think about it. Now I actually went back and painted them with a plastic primer. Because over the years, as you move around and they get knocked here and there, the paint just fell off the old ones. Once I started using a plastic primer, I never had that problem. And all you're trying to do is block sunlight from coming through that bucket. You know. The pumps I use, I standardize on 500 to 600 gallons per hour. You're pushing it through a half-inch pipe. No matter how you push it, you're not going to get large volume. Because it's not a pump that has a piston in it, it's a pump that just has a propeller in it that's magnetically driven off of the motor. That's why it's waterproof. And if it gets too much back pressure, the propellers just won't go as fast. So they work out fine. I've got a couple that I use for my holding tank water, and those are 6 gallon an hour. And you're only usually making up 3 or 4 gallons anyway. And those are real cheap. I think I pay $6 or $7 for those things. So at Sally's house, I've got 6 buckets at my house. I've gone as high as 13 buckets. This year I had 8 buckets. And it's on 2 sets of sawhorses, 16 foot long, 2 feet wide. All fed off 128 gallon holding tank. And that is it, ladies and gentlemen. Unless you've got some questions, or yes, sir?
I do.
Okay,
I've been on YouTube.
yeah.
My God, it's amazing what you find on YouTube.
You can spend, you can keep going till you were just a skeleton in your easy chair.
Here's my question.
Yeah.
I've got an attached garage, stays about 50 degrees in the winter.
Mm-hmm.
I like that craft key method.
Mm-hmm.
Craft key, that's the way you pronounce
Yeah,
it.
correct.
But you didn't talk about grow lights. So
No.
if I do the craft key method on some buckets in there,
Mm-hmm.
experiment with, how do I know how much light I'm gonna buy? I don't wanna do this in the summer outside, I wanna do it. in my-
Yeah, that's kind of a hard thing to know. There is formulas you can look at. I've got a grow light that's about 14 inches by 14 inches, has 600 LEDs in it.
Right.
And I use that when I start my stuff downstairs in the spring. And then I've got 4 foot by, well, I guess it's 4 foot by 4 foot with T5 bulbs. either 6 or 8 T5 bulbs in each one.
Now, these LEDs.
And I put those right down.
These LEDs.
No, these are fluorescents, and I put them about 2 inches off the top of that plant when they first started.
Okay. But then I have to raise it up as they grow.
Yeah.
Because I want to do it in the garage this winter, just
Well,
to play with it.
you can
and I
put a
got
tent
supplies.
in, you know, have you seen the tents that they use?
Well, I saw pictures of them on there. I should do that in the garage, you can't.
Either that or just hang plastic around it, like a
Now,
shower.
what's that do?
Just keeps the air current from blowing across it, and keep it, there'll be heat, a little bit of heat from those lamps that'll keep it warm.
Oh, I see, okay. But I need more than 50 degrees heat.
Yeah, a plant's not gonna grow, it'll start at 50, but if you'll notice, it's kinda like grass, you know, when it turns 70 degrees,
Right.
it's really coming up.
Okay, so I'm gonna need more, some heat then,
Yeah,
on top of it. Okay, well, I see.
well, you could try this, I haven't tried it before, but you can try this. They make submergible aquarium heaters. I don't think they're adjustable, but they are
Well, they got
set for like
control.
78 degrees.
Yeah.
And you can just leave that in your container.
Oh, you mean if I just heat the water?
Yeah, because the water's good, yeah, the
So
roots
the
are laid
temperature-
underwater.
So the air temperature is not so important.
Well, it's, the extra temperature's gonna raise up,
Okay.
especially if you put some kind of plastic around it.
So.
Oh, okay.
Okay, all right, well, that'll work.
I found the cat.
Oh, good. No wonder you're.
That's
late.
why I'm late.
Okay, have a seat and, yeah, what I bought this year, and I haven't erected it yet, is a 4 foot by 4 foot black canvas room with bubble wrap with reflective inside, and I'm gonna hang my light in there, and that's how I'm gonna start my plants. And I'd like to get them started in December, because I really think, it used to be, we didn't put our plants out till May 10th or so. Now, first of April, you can put your plants out. You may have to cover them once or twice, but,
Well, I just want to do it this winter, see what goes on, so.
well, absolutely,
So
I
So
think
I gotta have, okay, the heat, that's good, because I didn't know.
I'd get a piece of foam and put your holding tank on a foam,
Right,
so it's insulated, because the
right,
concrete floor is always gonna be at least 50 or
right,
colder,
okay.
because our ground here is 50 degrees year round.
Well, that's good, I had all that, good.
So a little piece of 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch foam, isolate your tank, I think you'd do great. If nothing else, you'll find out, won't you?
I'm looking for a
A
hobby.
learning experience.
As
I'm
far
looking
as-
for a hobby, so.
As far as solutions, you know, if you just want some chemical solutions and not buy a lot of it, Miracle-Gro has, I think it's called Miracle-Gro Plus. And it has all the regular nutrients and all the micronutrients. The regular one doesn't have the micronutrients. But they make one, I saw it at Walmart a couple of years ago. I think they call it Miracle-Gro Plus, or Tomatoes Plus or something. And if you look on it and it says it has micronutrients, then you're set. Sure.
Now, does the Epsom salts help reduce your pH?
No, Epsom salts is pretty well neutral. What it does, it sweetens up the plants.
Okay, so to get my pH down to that 6 number,
Yeah.
what do I have to add?
You're gonna have to add some kind of pH control.
Okay.
You can probably buy it by the pint at Amazon, or,
Okay.
I don't know of anybody in town that, other than these guys that work in their car under the tree and also go out and get battery acid and look in there. I just think that's kind of dangerous. But if you look up pH up, pH down, Amazon will have it in quantity.
Well, my $10 head of lettuce, I can buy for a buck at the store,
All right. I think growing lettuce is kind of a fun thing.
Well, they say basil's a big thing to grow. Keep saying
Basil, actually, a complete herb garden would be very nice.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
And it wouldn't take a whole lot, because you only need one plant. And then dump your solution at the top and let it drizzle down through all of it and come back to the holding tank.
Did you tell me about the
That'll
lettuce?
be all right.
The lettuce in Salt Lake?
No,
There's a restaurant in Salt Lake City that has hydroponic gardening for lettuce, and you can go in and pick out your own, go over to the thing and pick out your own lettuce. That's pretty neat.
yeah, I did have one, didn't I? I don't know what I did with that. I didn't bring it with me. I loaned it out to somebody and I haven't seen it since. And here's a catalog. That's the place that I get my nutrients. Let me back this thing up and see if I can find it. Oh, it's the Home Grower by Howard Rush.
Have you ever been to that place, it's up in south of Bloomington, you go on the old 37, there's that place right there that sells hydroponic stuff? You know what I'm talking?
Oh, you talking about the Golden Leaf?
Yes, do they,
Yeah, I've been in there, but I mean, unless you borrow money from the bank to go see them, I don't know if that's really beneficial.
Okay, I just noticed it.
They are knowledgeable. Those,
Okay.
they started as the group that was north of Bloomington. You familiar with what the guy used, well, there was a really big outfit north of Bloomington.